What we experienced between March and June was not ideal. It was an emergency response to an emergency situation. And we've spent the intervening months making sure we're well prepared for dealing with COVID-19 with a much higher level of educational rigor as we move into this fall.
But even with all these precautions, the COVID-19 virus may find our way into our schools. And again, we're expecting this and we're preparing for this. And I think just as we've had fire drills, we've had lockdown drills, people understand what to expect when these things happen, and that's part of the preparation, is preparing people's expectations about what's going to happen in the event of an outbreak.
So that was New Brunswick's Education Minister and Chief Medical Officer of Health earlier today, laying out their plan for how schools will operate this fall. Kindergarten to grade 8 students will attend school full-time, while high school students will rotate between class and online learning. As for masks, those will be mandatory for grades 6 to 12 in common areas, but only encouraged for kids in kindergarten to grade 5. For more on this and the province's plan, I'm joined by Education Minister Dominic Carty. He joins me from Fredericton. Minister Carty, thanks for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me on the show.
There's a lot of parents here in Ontario looking at your plan today saying, that sounds pretty good to me. You've decided to have smaller class sizes from kindergarten to grade 6, but regular class sizes from grade 6 and up. So why have you decided why have you not decided to go with small class sizes for all grades?
Well, we sort of divided the system up into 3 groups. So as you said, for the younger kids, we went with the idea that we've all become familiar with households of having a bubble around each class. And with that, trying to keep those classes as small as possible so that we minimize the exposure that comes along from being in a class of 13, 15, 16 kids. With the high school students, we're going for a different approach because there we really want to preserve the idea of personalization, that you don't want to have high school students all being forced to take the same courses at the same time. That doesn't prepare them for what they want to do with their lives. So with that, we said, look, we're going to have students working on a semester every day situation, basically, where we have blended learning. One day they're in regular classes, another day they'll be working on projects, in some cases doing online courses. We have an initiative that we rolled out last year where high school students can take university courses and get dual university and high school credits. Students who maybe were struggling can take that day to catch up. Students that are racing ahead can do that, and the kids in the middle can do a mix of those things, making sure they've mastered the material from the previous day, working on projects that interest them, because that's what you need at high school, whether you're going out into the workforce, community college, or university. So that was the goal. So for the younger kids, use the whole idea of a bubble to try and protect them from any risk of infection. At the high school level, more of a reliance on masks, recognizing though that those students have to move from class to class to get the sort of education that they deserve and should expect.
So the younger kids are in the bubble. The older kids will move around a little bit more, but as you say, masks are going to be required for the older students, grade 6 and up, and when they're on buses, for example, unless they're sitting alone, right? If same household, they can sit together. If it's 2 together, they have to wear masks, right?
Yeah, and that's it. And that's going to be, and the thing I said there, we put out this big document today, and there's going to be lots of different variables there. But what I've tried to say to parents is, look, your students are going to experience, your kids are going to experience one day each at a time. And after the first week or so, they'll get used to that routine, and that routine should stay basically the same throughout this year, unless, God forbid, we have an outbreak and we have to go on to online learning, which we've also prepared for. But trying to be as flexible and reasonable as possible and striking that balance between a necessary focus on public safety, but also making sure that our kids get the best education they possibly can.
So the older kids have to wear masks if they're in common spaces in school, going between classrooms, but not inside the classroom necessarily. So why not? Why not require masks inside the classroom, considering the older kids are not going to be in a bubble like, say, kindergartens and grade 1 would be?
Because with the younger kids, we're not enforcing social distancing measures because there's been a whole lot of evidence. I know you've talked about it on the show before with people who are specialists in children's health who talk about the risks of cutting off human contact from children. These are tiny people who need to be able to learn about how to engage with others, and we need to try and make sure we can do that in a way that's safe. And so Dr. Russell, our Chief Medical Officer, said today, and I repeat this all the time, the way for us to really protect New Brunswick is to keep the virus out of our borders. And we've managed to do that pretty successfully. But ultimately, that's going to be how we keep schools safe. And if there comes to be a risk to those bubbles for the younger kids, then we move into online learning if that seemed to be the right thing to do. But for the high school kids, we'll enforce social distancing there, which is why we why we're saying that you don't need to have the mask in class as long as you're maintaining the social distance that we've laid out, because that's in line with the health recommendations that we're following for other areas of life in this strange world we're living in right now.
Right. It doesn't sound like the Atlantic bubble is going to be popped anytime soon if your plan is to keep it out of the region as a key method to keeping it out of the schools, right? It seems like the Atlantic free zone is going to continue for a little while. Is that the plan?
That's certainly, we've had no indications that we want to change that right now. When you look at the horrors coming at us from the south with what's going on in the U.S., that I'm happy to be in New Brunswick right now.
So when school actually gets underway, I mean, we plans sometimes have to change, right? Because they don't unfold the way you expect them. What would be the criteria for where you have to go back to a shutdown or have to go to a distance, go back to distance learning? I mean, would it be one test? Would it be two tests? Like, is there a threshold for where you might realize you have to close a school again?
And that's a question better asked to my colleagues at Public Health, but they've laid out the criteria saying, look, we can't afford to have another shutdown like we did this spring unless it's under really extreme circumstances. So what we've tried to do is design a system that's resilient, that has all the measures that we've chatted about, so that even if cases do crop up in a community, that we can keep school going as long as possible under difficult circumstances, because school is so important. And the safety of the students is obviously, and the staff is obviously also extremely important. So we have to keep on maintaining that balance. So my hope is that we avoid that because of the measures that we're taking as a province and as a region, as you mentioned as well. But if we do get to a point where we have to shut down again, what we've done there is make sure that we're able to switch very quickly to online learning so that students can learn from home. Earlier this summer, we provided laptops and iPads to make sure that at least every household has access to some form of electronic communication. And another innovation is that we have a program in place now saying that high school students have to have a laptop. And we recognize that's a financial burden, so we put in place a program as well to provide subsidies for families up to $85,000 who earn $85,000 and below, sliding scale of subsidies from $200 to $600, making sure we've got access to a government-procured Dell laptop, $580. It'll do exactly what's needed. So we're trying to make sure that we maintain an equitable system where no one's disadvantaged because of their family's income. And if we have to go online, that'll obviously become the backbone of our system. But everything we're doing is to try and avoid that happening. And again, fingers crossed, things are looking good right now, but this disease keeps on coming at us in different ways, so we have to be ready for the worst.
Well, that's what I wanted to ask you about. I mean, you rolled out your plan today. You've got a class size plan. You've got a busing plan. You've got a distance learning plan. And you say you're going to have individualized plans for, I think, the 294 or 296 schools you have in the province. So you know what your plan is there. What's the big unknown? What is the thing that keeps you up at night right now as you get ready to reopen schools?
The big unknown is what happens with the science around the disease as we keep on finding out new things about it, and the risk of people letting down their guard and us having an uncontrolled community spread in the province. Because in the end, the response to this disease that's led New Brunswick to be one of the world leaders in terms of rates of infection per 100,000. We're second only, I believe, to PEI. Out of all the Canadian provinces and American states. What's led us to that position is because New Brunswickers, not being forced to, but because they heard the message from Public Health, they heard the message from the Premier, from myself and others in government, that they did the right thing, that we embrace social distancing, that when things shut down, we shut down hard and we shut down early. And that allowed us to become the first province in the country to reopen. And now we have the highest rate of business reopenings of any province. And we're seeing a level of optimism here that housing prices and the housing market in the province are booming right now. And we're saying to people, look, come to New Brunswick if you want to be safe. You'll have to socially distance for 2 weeks before you can set up shop, but come on in and take those 2 weeks and we'd welcome you here. So what scares me is that if we lose that, and one of the dangers of being in a place where things are going well, and also because of the current conditions, folks aren't traveling so much, is that if people become complacent and they start to say, oh, well, why do we have all these measures? And we're seeing that. And we're seeing that with organized, loony populist groups as well, trying to spread messages about how the disease is a fake or we don't need masks and whatever else. So maintaining a serious level of public communication from the government, from experts, from scientists saying this is serious, the risks are real, but there are things that we can do that don't ruin our day-to-day lives to try and deal with this. And so far in New Brunswick, I'm really proud to be part of a government that's led the way in showing that if you engage citizens and trust them to do the right thing, they by and large do. And I just hope that continues again, regardless of the flood of weird misinformation coming from the States and from oddball populist groups around Canada, also trying to spread anti-science messages, which are dangerous, whether they're on COVID-19, dangers of vaccines, another one of the foolish things they try and talk about. All that stuff is all out there, and it's as much of a risk as the pandemic to the long-term stability of our society.
Okay, Minister, thank you so much for your time, and good luck with back to school.
Hey, thank you so much, and you too. We're in the end, across Canada, we're all in this together. Thanks so much.
That's for sure. Thank you. That's New Brunswick Education Minister Dominic Carty joining us from Fredericton.
Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.